Blood streaked Sarah Thompson's forehead as she cradled her unconscious son Liam on the scorching edge of Route 85. Abandoned by her late husband's family, she whispered, "Stay with me, baby," her voice breaking under Buckeye's merciless sun. No cars stopped, no one cared, except one stranger, slowing his truck. Why did the town turn its back on her? What secrets did the Prestons hide? Sarah's fight for her son was just beginning, and the truth would change everything. Sarah Thompson clung to her son, Liam, on the cracked shoulder of State Route 85 in Merrick Day. Sarah's voice broke as she whispered, "Liam, stay with me, please." His small hand, clutching her torn sleeve, felt limp, his breathing shallow. No one stopped. Tires hummed past, kicking up red dust that stung her eyes. The Prestons, her late husband's family, had left them here, beaten, discarded, and branded as unworthy. Sarah's knees ached from the gravel, her forehead bruised, but the real pain was the weight of a town that had already judged her. Sarah had once been part of the Preston family's orbit, married to Daniel, their golden son. His death in a car crash had unleashed their wrath. Margaret Preston, the family matriarch, called her a leech, a woman who'd seduced her way into wealth only to ruin it. Victor Langley, the family's slick financial advisor, spread whispers that Sarah's reckless behavior caused the accident. The truth, that Daniel's drinking and affairs led to the crash, was buried under their influence. In Buckeye, Arizona, money spoke louder than facts, and Sarah, a single mother with no job or status, was an easy target. Classism and small-town gossip had stripped her of dignity long before they dragged her from their gated estate and left her here. She pressed her hand to Liam's feverish forehead, his lips cracked and blue. Her own sunburned skin peeled, her cotton dress ripped at the hem. A tattered bag held their last possessions, a half-empty water bottle, a worn photo of Liam as a toddler, and a few dollars. Sarah's voice trembled. "You're all I have, baby. Don't let go." The cicada's hum was her only answer, the heat stealing her breath. She'd begged for help at the Preston estate, pounding on the iron gate until her fists bled. Margaret had watched from a window, her silk dress pristine, her gaze cold as the iced coffee in her hand. "She's no longer family," Victor had said, his voice smooth as venom. The gate locked shut and Sarah had stumbled away, carrying Liam until they collapsed. Sarah's thoughts spiraled to the years of Daniel's cruelty, his late-night rages, his mockery of her low-class roots. She'd stayed for Liam, hoping to shield him from a broken home. Now, with nothing left, she wondered if she'd failed him entirely. The town saw her as a gold digger, a woman who'd traded beauty for a mansion only to lose it all. The injustice burned deeper than the sun. A single mother, abandoned and slandered, had no voice in a place where wealth wrote the rules. A low rumble broke her thoughts. A dusty blue pickup slowed, its engine rattling. Sarah tensed, clutching Liam tighter, her eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. The driver, a man in his early 40s, rolled down the window. His face, weathered but kind, carried a shadow of grief. "Your boy needs help," he said, voice steady, not pitying. "I've got water and a truck. Let me take you to a doctor." Sarah's instinct was to refuse. Trust had betrayed her before. But Liam's shallow breaths left her no choice. She nodded, not out of faith, but surrender. The man stepped out, keeping his distance. James Harper was a name known in Buckeye, a farmer who'd inherited wealth, but lived like a hermit after losing his wife, Ellen, and daughter, Sophie, in a fire. He avoided people, their questions, their pity. Yet something about Sarah's fierce grip on her son stirred a memory. Ellen's hand reaching for him through smoke. He set a water bottle on the ground, stepping back. "I won't come closer," he said. "But he's burning up. I know someone who can help." Sarah's eyes wavered, torn between fear and necessity. She glanced at Liam, his small chest barely rising. Tears welled, but she forced them back. "Okay," she whispered, lifting Liam with trembling arms. James opened the truck's back door and Sarah slid in, cradling her son. The interior smelled of leather and dust, simple but clean. James handed her a damp cloth, his movements deliberate, respectful. "For his fever," he said, then climbed into the driver's seat. As the truck pulled onto Route 85, Sarah dabbed Liam's forehead, her heart pounding. She didn't ask James's name or motives. She couldn't afford to. In the rearview mirror, James's eyes flicked to them, not with judgment, but with a quiet understanding. "Clinic's closed today," he said, "but I know a nurse in Buckeye. She'll come." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. For the first time, someone saw her not as a scandal, but as a mother fighting for her child. The truck rumbled toward Buckeye, carrying a flicker of hope through the desert's unrelenting glare. The pickup rattled along State Route 85, its tires humming against the cracked asphalt as Sarah Thompson cradled Liam in the back seat. His fever hadn't broken, but the damp cloth James Harper had given her brought a faint flush to his cheeks. Sarah's hands trembled, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of a choice she'd made, trusting a stranger. Buckeye, Arizona loomed ahead, a small town where whispers traveled faster than the wind. Sarah knew the risks. Her name was already a stain in the community's eyes, a single mother branded as a failure, a gold digger who'd ruined Daniel Preston's legacy. Yet, with Liam's small body limp against her, she had no room for doubt. James drove in silence, his eyes fixed on the road. The truck's interior, worn leather and a faint scent of antiseptic, felt like a temporary shield from the world that had cast her out. Sarah glanced at him through the rearview mirror, searching for a motive. His face, lined with grief, held no pity, only a quiet resolve that unsettled her. She'd learned to fear kindness. It often came with strings, but Liam's shallow breaths kept her anchored. She pressed the cloth to his forehead, whispering, "You can be okay, baby. I promise." Her voice cracked, betraying the fear she couldn't bury. They pulled into a gravel driveway off a quiet Buckeye road where James's ranch stood, modest, with white wooden fences and a brick house weathered but proud. Sarah hesitated as James opened the truck door, his movements slow, respectful. "Mary Collins, a retired nurse, lives nearby," he said. "She'll check on your boy." Sarah nodded, lifting Liam carefully, her arms aching but unyielding. The ranch smelled of dry grass and hay, a stark contrast to the Preston estate's polished sterility. Inside, the house was sparse but clean, with faded photos on a shelf, a woman and a young girl, their smiles frozen in time. Sarah's chest tightened. She recognized loss when she saw it. Mary Collins arrived, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and steady hands. She examined Liam on a guest bed, her touch gentle but efficient. "Fever's high and his arms swollen, likely a fracture," she said, bandaging Liam's wrist. "You kept him conscious this long, Sarah. That's no small thing." Sarah's throat tightened at the words, the first acknowledgement of her fight. She sat beside Liam, stroking his hair, her mind replaying the Preston estate. Margaret's cold stare, Victor's smug voice as they shoved her out. "You're nothing without us," Victor had sneered. The town believed it too. Single mothers like Sarah were invisible in Buckeye unless they were a scandal. As Mary worked, James lingered in the doorway, his broad frame casting a shadow. He didn't speak, but his presence felt steady, like the ranch itself. Sarah caught his gaze, wary, but softening. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice low. James paused, his eyes drifting to the photo on the shelf. "I lost my wife, Ellen, and daughter Sophie in a fire," he said, his tone flat but heavy. "I couldn't save them, but I can save him." The words landed like a stone in Sarah's chest, stirring a memory of her own. Daniel's voice, slurring through the phone, blaming her as his car sped toward disaster. She pushed it away, focusing on Liam's slow breaths. That night, Sarah sat by Liam's bed, clutching his worn teddy bear. The room was quiet, save for the creak of the house settling. In the dark, her fears spilled out. She'd been a waitress before marrying Daniel, scraping by in a trailer park, dreaming of a better life for Liam. The Prestons had promised stability, but delivered control, stripping her of confidence until she believed she deserved their scorn. Now Buckeye's gossip painted her as a schemer, a woman who'd traded beauty for wealth and lost. The injustice gnawed at her. Why did money and status let the Prestons rewrite her story? Why did a single mother have to beg to be seen as human? Liam stirred, his small voice breaking the silence. "Mom, are we safe now?" Sarah's heart cracked. She forced a smile, brushing his cheek. "We're safe, sweetheart. I've got you." But as he drifted back to sleep, tears fell onto the teddy bear. She wasn't sure she believed her own words. Outside, James sat on the porch, staring at the stars. He hadn't planned to open his home, let alone his heart, but Sarah's fierce love for Liam reminded him of Ellen's last words. "Don't shut the world out, James." He didn't know Sarah's story, but he saw her strength, a mother who'd rather break than let go. The next morning, Liam's fever eased and he sat up, shyly asking James about the horses outside. James handed him a carrot for the mare, Daisy, and Liam's eyes lit up, a spark of childhood returning. Sarah watched from the kitchen, her hands still on a damp cloth, feeling a flicker of hope. But Buckeye's whispers were already spreading, neighbors murmuring about the outsider at James's ranch, store clerks turning away when Sarah passed. The Prestons' influence lingered, a reminder that kindness came at a cost in a town ruled by prejudice. Sarah straightened, her resolve hardening. She'd survived Daniel's cruelty, Margaret's betrayal, and the desert's heat. She wouldn't let gossip break her now. Sarah Thompson stood in the kitchen of James Harper's ranch, her hands gripping a chipped mug of coffee, the steam curling like a faint hope. Liam, now stronger, sat outside feeding carrots to Daisy the mare, his laughter a fragile melody against Buckeye's growing hostility. A week at the ranch had steadied Sarah's heart, but the town's whispers cut deeper than the desert heat. The Prestons' campaign to erase her had taken root. Neighbors crossed the street when she passed, their eyes sharp with judgment. In Buckeye, Arizona, a single mother without wealth was less than invisible. She was a threat. Margaret Preston and Victor Langley, the architects of Sarah's exile, hadn't stopped at throwing her out. They'd spread lies that painted her as a schemer, a woman who'd latched onto James Harper's wealth after destroying Daniel's life. The local market buzzed with gossip. "She's living at Harper's ranch, probably after his money." A gas station clerk had smirked, refusing her change, muttering, "We don't serve her kind." The injustice stung. Sarah had no inheritance, no job, just Liam and a stubborn will to keep him safe. Classicism and gender bias wove through Buckeye's streets like barbed wire, and the Prestons' influence tightened the strands. Sarah's resolve hardened when she overheard Liam's question to James in the yard, "Why don't people like Mom?" His small voice cracked, his eyes searching James's face. Sarah's heart sank. She'd shielded him from Daniel's cruelty, but she couldn't hide the town's scorn. She stepped outside, kneeling beside him. "Some people don't understand us, Liam, but we know who we are." Her voice was steady, but inside she ached. She remembered her own mother, a waitress, who'd faced similar whispers, working double shifts to keep Sarah fed. "You're not a burden," her mother had said. Words Sarah now clung to. She wouldn't let Liam grow up believing he was less. The blow came when a court notice arrived, delivered by a stern-faced courier to the ranch. Margaret Preston had filed for custody of Liam, claiming Sarah was unfit with no stable home, no income, and questionable associations with James. The petition was a knife, sharp with accusations that echoed the town's prejudice. A single mother couldn't raise a child, especially one tied to the Prestons' legacy. Sarah's hand shook as she read the document, her mind racing. She'd lost everything, her home, her reputation, but losing Liam was unthinkable. She tucked the notice away, vowing to fight, not for herself, but for the boy who called her Mom. Sarah began gathering evidence of her care. She collected Liam's medical records from Mary Collins, noting every fever she'd nursed, every scraped knee she'd bandaged. She documented her volunteer hours at a local women's shelter, where she'd taught literacy to other single mothers, women like her, dismissed by Buckeye's elite. Each paper was a brick in the wall she built to protect Liam, but the town's rejection weighed heavier. At the general store, a clerk refused to sell her school supplies, turning away with a mutter about troublemakers. Children at the park taunted Liam, chanting, "Your mom's a leech." Sarah pulled him close, her smile forced, but his hurt eyes mirrored her own childhood shame. At night, Sarah sat by Liam's bed, watching him sleep, his teddy bear clutched tight. She whispered, "I'm not enough sometimes, but I'll never stop trying." Tears fell as she remembered her mother's calloused hands, sewing late into the night to afford her school books. The world hadn't been kind to her mother either, judging her for poverty, her single status. Sarah's fight wasn't just for Liam. It was for every woman Buckeye dismissed as less. She began writing a journal, detailing Liam's routines, her love, her sacrifices, knowing it might be her only voice in court. James noticed her quiet determination, his own grief stirring. He'd faced Buckeye's whispers after the fire, pitying looks that made him retreat to the ranch. "You're stronger than they think," he told Sarah, handing her a glass of water. His words weren't comfort, they were recognition. Sarah met his gaze, her voice soft but firm. "I have to be. Liam's all I've got." Outside, the ranch's stillness contrasted with the town's cruelty, but Sarah knew the battle was coming. The Prestons' wealth could buy lawyers, but Sarah's love for Liam was a force no money could match. She straightened, ready to face a town that had already condemned her. The Maricopa County Courthouse loomed over Sarah Thompson like a judgment she'd already faced in Buckeye's whispers. She stood at the entrance, her hair tied neatly, her second-hand dress pressed but plain. Liam sat beside her, clutching her hand, his bandaged arm a reminder of the day the Prestons left them on Route 85. Today wasn't just about custody. It was about reclaiming her name from a town that had branded her unfit. Inside, the air was heavy with the weight of wealth and prejudice, but Sarah's resolve burned brighter. She'd spent sleepless nights gathering evidence. Liam's medical records, her shelter volunteer logs, her journal of their daily life, each page a testament to a mother's love no court could measure. Margaret Preston sat across the courtroom, her gray suit crisp, her eyes cold behind designer glasses. Victor Langley, leaning on a polished cane, smirked as if the outcome was already his. Their lawyer, a sharp-suited man from Phoenix, opened with a barrage. Sarah lacked a stable home, a job, and moral standing, living parasitically at James Harper's ranch. "A single mother with no means," he said, "cannot provide for a Preston heir." The words echoed Buckeye's gossip, each one a jab at Sarah's dignity. The town's classism and gender bias hung thick. Her poverty and status as a widow made her an easy scapegoat, while the Prestons' wealth bought credibility. Sarah stood, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've never had wealth, but I've given Liam everything. Every bedtime story, every fever I nursed, every moment I chose him over my own pain." She presented her evidence, medical records showing Liam's recovery, letters from shelter women praising her kindness, her journal detailing meals cooked on a budget. Her hands shook as she spoke, not from fear, but from the weight of truth. "If being a mother means standing by your child when the world turns away, I've done that. If it means fighting lies, I'm here." Liam's eyes, wide and trusting, gave her strength. She squeezed his hand, feeling his small fingers curl into hers. The courtroom shifted when Emily Carter, a young Phoenix journalist with a dog-eared notebook, took the stand. She'd heard Sarah's story through a shelter contact and dug deeper, uncovering a trail the Prestons thought buried. Daniel Preston's crash wasn't Sarah's fault, Emily said, her voice clear. She presented phone logs showing Daniel arguing with a mistress, not Sarah, minutes before his car hit 110 miles per hour, no brakes applied. She revealed forged contracts where Victor, with Margaret's approval, swindled James Harper out of 50 acres of farmland, using Daniel's trust fund to hide profits. They defamed Sarah to protect their crimes, Emily said, laying out bank records and a former accountant's testimony. The courtroom fell silent, Margaret's composure cracking, Victor's smirk gone. James Harper stood next, his flannel shirt and steady gaze a contrast to the Prestons' polish. "I'm James Harper, a farmer, not a saint," he began. "I lost my wife and daughter in a fire. I shut the world out, until I saw Sarah on that road, holding Liam like he was her whole world. She's not here for my money. She's here for her son." His voice softened, eyes on Sarah. "Liam calls me Uncle James now. That's not about wealth, it's about trust." He turned to the judge. The Prestons call her unfit, but they're the ones who lied, cheated, and left a child to die. His words carried the weight of a man who'd lost everything, but found purpose in Sarah's fight. Sarah's chest tightened as she spoke last, her voice raw. I've been called a failure, a leech, a woman who doesn't belong. I've felt that shame, believed it sometimes. But every night, when Liam sleeps, I know I'm his mother. That's enough. Tears welled, but she held the judge's gaze. I don't need a mansion. I need my son. Liam leaned into her, whispering, You're my hero, Mom. The words broke her open, not with sorrow, but with a fierce love that silenced the room. The judge's gavel fell, his voice firm. Evidence shows Sarah Thompson is a devoted mother. The plaintiff's claims are baseless, tainted by fraud. He ruled Sarah retained sole custody. Victor faced immediate fraud charges, his cane clattering as marshals cuffed him. Margaret's face drained of color, her influence crumbling. Sarah exhaled, her knees buckling, but James caught her arm, his grip steady. You did it? He whispered. She nodded, tears falling not from defeat but from a victory she'd never dared imagine. The courtroom, once a stage for her shame, now bore witness to her truth. A single mother, judged by a town's prejudice, had stood tall for her son. Sarah Thompson stepped out of the Maricopa County Courthouse, her hand clasped around Liam's, the weight of victory both liberating and heavy. The judge's ruling, sole custody hers, Victor Langley in cuffs. Margaret Preston's influence, shattered, had silenced Buckeye's cruelest whispers, but Sarah knew the town's prejudice wouldn't vanish overnight. She'd fought not just for Liam, but against a system that judged single mothers like her as less. Their poverty a crime, their resilience ignored. Back at James Harper's ranch, she stood in the kitchen, sunlight filtering through a dusty window, and felt a shift. For the first time, she wasn't running. Liam, his arm still bandaged, ran to the yard to see Daisy, the mare, his laughter lighter than it had been in weeks. Sarah watched, her heart swelling. She'd shielded him from so much: Daniel's cruelty, the Prestons' betrayal, the town's scorn. Yet his trust in her, his small hand in hers during the trial, had anchored her. That night she sat by his bed, his teddy bear tucked under his arm. Mom, are we really safe now? He asked, eyes wide. Sarah's throat tightened. She brushed his hair, whispering, We're safe, Liam, and we're enough. Her words were a promise, not just to him but to herself. A vow to never let Buckeye's biases define them. The town began to change, slowly, like desert rain seeping into cracked earth. Mary Collins, the retired nurse, stopped by with a basket of homemade bread, her eyes soft with regret. I should have spoken up sooner, she said, handing Sarah a loaf, still warm. Clara Evans, the general store owner who'd once turned Sarah away, left a bag of school supplies on the porch with a note, I was wrong. These gestures, small but sincere, chipped away at the wall of classism and judgment that had isolated Sarah. She didn't forgive easily, not after years of being dismissed, but she accepted their efforts, knowing Liam deserved a community, not a battlefield. Sarah found purpose in giving back. She started teaching literacy classes at the ranch, turning James's old barn into a makeshift classroom for Buckeye's overlooked children of migrant workers, single mothers like her, families the town's elite ignored. She stood at a chalkboard, guiding hesitant hands to form letters, her voice steady but kind. You're not your mistakes, she told a shy teenager, echoing words her own mother once spoke. Each lesson was a defiance of the prejudice that had nearly broken her, a way to rewrite the narrative for others. James watched from the sidelines, his grief softening as the ranch came alive with voices. One evening, he showed Sarah a box of Sophie's drawings, bright sketches of horses and stars. Ellen used to say Sophie's art kept us human, he said, his voice low. You're doing that for Liam, for all those kids. Sarah's eyes stung, not from pity but from being seen. She touched a faded drawing, her voice soft. I'm just trying to give them what I almost lost. James nodded, his silence a bridge between their losses, their strengths. Buckeye's wounds didn't heal fully. The whispers lingered, the Prestons' legacy too deep to erase quickly. But Sarah's classes drew more faces each week, and the ranch felt less like a refuge and more like a home. One afternoon, Sarah and Liam planted a garden behind the barn, their hands in the soil, a cactus blooming nearby. Liam grinned, dirt smudged on his cheek. "This is ours, right, Mom?" Sarah smiled, her heart lighter. "Ours, Liam, and no one can take it." The garden, like her resolve, was small but stubborn, a symbol of growth in a town that had tried to uproot her. Sarah looked at James across the yard, his flannel shirt rolled up as he fixed a fence. He wasn't her savior, but her ally, a man who'd chosen to stand with her when the world turned away. She didn't need his wealth or his name, just his belief in her. As the sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the ranch, Sarah felt a quiet truth. She'd fought for Liam, for herself, and for every invisible soul in Buckeye. The battle wasn't over, but she was no longer alone. Sarah Thompson stood in the yard of James Harper's ranch, her hands still dusted with soil from the garden she and Liam had planted. The Buckeye sun cast a golden glow, softening the edges of a town that had once turned its back on her. The courtroom victory had kept Liam by her side, but Sarah knew true healing lay beyond legal battles. Buckeye's prejudice, its classism, its dismissal of single mothers like her, lingered like dust in the air. Yet in the faces of the children now filling her makeshift classroom in James's barn, she saw a chance to rewrite the story, not just for herself, but for every overlooked soul in Maricopa County. Sarah's vision took shape as the Buckeye Community Center, a haven born from the ranch's old stables. She and James worked side by side, sanding wooden beams, painting walls, and turning a forgotten space into a place of learning and refuge. The center offered literacy classes, job training for single parents, and a safe space for children like Liam, who'd once been taunted for his mother's name. Sarah stood at the opening, her voice steady as she addressed a small crowd. "This isn't about me," she said, Liam's hand in hers. "It's about giving those the world ignores a chance to be seen." Mary Collins and Clara Evans stood in the front row, their nods a quiet apology for Buckeye's past. Liam, now 10, thrived in the center's light. He read stories to younger kids, his once shy voice clear and proud. One evening, he handed Sarah a folded paper, his eyes bright. "I wrote something for you, Mom." It was a story titled "The Woman Who Built a Home," about a mother who turned pain into purpose. As Sarah read it aloud at the center's first community night, tears glistened in the audience's eyes. Liam's words painted her not as a victim, but as a builder, a woman who'd faced a town's scorn and chose to plant hope. "My mom's a hero," he wrote, "because she made a family out of broken pieces." Sarah's own healing came quietly. One afternoon, she drove to the cemetery where Daniel was buried, Liam asleep in the back seat. She stood before his grave, the wind carrying the scent of sage. "I don't hate you," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "I forgive you, not for you, but for me." It wasn't love or anger that drove her. It was peace. A release from the shame Buckeye had heaped on her. She'd once believed she needed others' approval to be whole. Now she knew she and Liam were enough. James remained her ally, not a savior. He donated the land for the center, his quiet presence a steady anchor. One night, as they sat on the porch, he handed her a coffee mug, his eyes warm. "You've made this place alive again," he said. Sarah smiled, her guard gone. "You gave us a start, James." "I'm just finishing what we began." Their bond wasn't romance, but a shared strength. Two people who'd lost everything and found purpose in lifting others. Buckeye's transformation was slow but real. The center drew families the town had ignored. Migrant workers, single mothers, kids labeled as trouble. Sarah taught them to read, to dream, her own mother's words echoing, "You're not your circumstances." Yet prejudice lingered. Some shopkeepers still whispered, and Margaret Preston's name carried weight. Sarah didn't fight with anger, but with action, her center a defiance of the classism that had once cast her out. Years later, Liam, now a teenager, sent Sarah a letter. "Dear Mom," it began, "I'm writing from the same room where you taught me to read. I'm not a kid anymore, but I still see you, the woman who stood up when Buckeye tried to break you. They called you nothing, but you built everything. You taught me family isn't where you're born, it's where you choose to stay. I'm proud to be your son." Sarah read it on the center's porch, tears falling onto the page. She wasn't just a mother, she was a light for those lost in the dark. The Buckeye Community Center stood as Sarah's legacy, its walls echoing with laughter and second chances. She looked at Liam, now reading to a group of kids, and James, fixing a chair nearby. The town hadn't erased its scars, but Sarah had turned hers into strength. "We don't need everyone to love us," she told Liam, her voice steady. "We just need to love who we are." Under the Arizona sun, a once broken woman had built a home, not just for her son, but for a community ready to heal. Sarah's journey in Under the Arizona Sun reminds us that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about rising despite the weight of judgment. Her fight against prejudice and her choice to build a community center speak to the power of kindness over cruelty. I believe we've all faced moments of being unseen, whether by society's biases or our own doubts. Do you agree that small acts of courage, like Sarah's, can change lives? Or do you think systemic barriers are too entrenched to overcome? I love to hear your thoughts. Share your stories or perspectives below. Thank you for joining me in this story of hope and rebirth. Your support means the world. Please follow for more stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us. Let's keep the conversation going. What's a moment when you stood up against the odds?